Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Monday, November 25th, 2024. I've been doing a daily countdown of my 366 favorite video games of all time, and coming in at number 37 is Borderlands 2. As the year approaches its end, every single day, I should be able to find something to say it's the last time I'll be talking about whatever thing in the year. Not only is this the highest ranked Borderlands game, I've only ever owned the 2, so woo, it's the highest ranked comedy game. There are certainly other games that have comedic moments and story beats, of course, but Borderlands is meant to be silly and funny the whole way through, from story to world building to combat, just everything. And oh man, is this game funny. The game takes place a few years after the events of the first Borderlands game, which I ranked as my 64th favorite game. You can check the description for a link to that video, but I will be referencing some things throughout this one, and a lot of that is going to be because there are some important things I actually prefer about the first game, but the things that are better in the second game are so much better, it gets a higher ranking. The story hook here is that it turns out opening the vault on Pandora activated the proliferation of an alien substance called iridium, which is extremely rare and extremely valuable. This attracted the attention of the Hyperion Corporation, run by a guy named Handsome Jack. Well, at least that's what he calls himself. Jack's a bit full of himself, and by a bit, I mean he's the most selfish, narcissistic antagonist I have ever seen in any form of media ever. But he's also hilarious and is hands down the best part of this game. You are a new generation of Vault Hunter, attracted to the planet of Pandora because Jack discovered a second vault. But he's also positioned himself in orbit and is basically an iron-fisted dictator ruling over the place. From his station in space, he can observe many of your actions and talk directly to you, and he sure has a lot to say. The entire time you're playing this game, he might chime in with some quip about how inadequate you are, or all of the ways he's going to kill you and your friends, and he certainly tries. The game's opening is an assault on a train that each of the new characters think Jack is on, only to discover that it's a clever trap to kill them all. Unfortunately for Jack, whichever character you chose to play as survives. There are 4 different characters to choose from in the base version of Borderlands 2, but DLC adds a couple more. They're fun, but I actually haven't gotten the DLC myself. I've just played with other people, and so I won't be talking about those. There's a lot of overlap with the original cast. Like, you have a soldier that plays a turret, and you have a siren that does, like, psychic or whatever attacks. The other classes are a bit different, though. Zero is close in some ways to Mordecai. He's an assassin that excels at sniping and other farm-range combat, but he also can be played with close combat in mind, making heavy use of his sword. The Gunzerker is pretty new, but is a natural inclusion for a shooting game oriented on tons of bullets and ungodly amounts of loot. It's all in the name there. You shoot a whole lot and just keep shooting and never stop shooting, and like he can even do a thing where he dual wields, which is super cool. Lots of shooting. Like in the first game, we're mixing a whole lot of RPG elements into our shooting game, and many of them are expanded and improved upon. The talent trees are one of the first immediate improvements. There's way more talents to pick from, with 6 tiers of talents in each branch instead of 4, and the majority of the talents are also more exciting. There's still a handful here or there that are just like, do X% more damage with this specific type of gun, but there's also things like deploying your turret sets off a small nuclear blast. Each class has some great variety in how they can be played, and while they don't fall under such distinct lines as some of the tank damage support pillars of the first game, skewing more towards everyone kills everything with some occasional support or survival skills. They focus more on differentiating the different styles of combat each character can do. I'll use Zero the Assassin as an example, but this logic applies to everybody. His first branch is sniping. The name is self-explanatory there. Sit at the back and pick away at enemies before they'll even dream of reaching you. I'm generally actually not good, really, at aiming in shooters, which if you watched any shooter at all on this channel, you've probably figured that out. I did not need to tell you that. So I generally don't go this route in fast-paced games, but I love sniping in games with more tactical, slow paces. For better or worse, that's not Borderlands, so I don't go deep in this tree, even though it has the coolest talent in the game at the bottom. Basically, every time you get a headshot, or whatever critical point would be on some of the non-human enemies, with a sniper rifle, you get a stacking bonus to your critical damage and even just regular damage. This stacks 999 times, which basically means it stacks forever until you stop getting crits for a while. So that's like 6,000% bonus crit damage and another 5,000 bonus damage period if you get it all the way up there, which is hilariously high and, as far as I know, maybe even impossible. His second branch is called Cunning. His special activated skill turns him invisible and spawns a decoy for enemies to attack, increasing damage for your next attack the longer you are invisible. It's super fun and actually pretty strategic and lets you be really just very flexible in how you play. So this branch focuses heavily on making the most of this, including giving you attacks you can do without breaking your invisibility, so you can slow things down, strike hard, and then get to safety to do it again. Which is a cool and unique way to do things in Borderlands, which is mostly way more just guns blazing. Zero's last branch, though, is Bloodshed, which is a lot more of the guns blazing. It takes him in a totally different direction than the other two, moving away from the long-range strengths and the stealth attacks, though you can mix those in, and putting him on the front lines, mowing everything down in sight. It makes heavy use of his melee attacks and encourages you to mix in gunplay to generate boosts to your melee, which generates boosts to your guns, which generates boosts to your melee, which generates boosts to your... I think you get the idea. That's 3 entirely different offensive playstyles, all for one character, and every character has stuff that's just as different. Beyond just choosing said character and then spending your talent points as you level up, there's more ways to diversify your playstyle, especially when you get into multiplayer. Maya, the Siren this time around, does have the only real support talent branch in this one, making her interesting there, but she also has a branch entirely focused on elemental weapons. This ties into the gun variety, of course. On the one hand, the average gun is way cooler in Borderlands 2, having a lot of things that aren't just like, well, does it shoot harder or faster? No, they do interesting things. There's more focus on these different elemental guns, for example, with the types from the first game returning. Fire burns flesh, electricity depletes shields, and corrosive eats through armor. But there's a new type that's a lot of fun, and if you have an organized multiplayer group, is probably worth having one player just keeping that going, even if they don't do anything else. It's called Slag, which coats enemies in a goopy substance that increases the amount of damage they take from all other non-slag sources. Slag is a lot of fun and is a terrific addition to the game. There's a lot of other really cool things that they did with the guns to differentiate the various manufacturers this time, like having Tedior's weapons all do the very cool thing, it's very cool, of being thrown as grenades every time you reload, and the more bullets that are left in the gun, the more damage this grenade does, so you can even be kind of strategic and flexible in that way in how you approach it. That being said, the distribution of weapons is significantly worse in Borderlands 2, I think. It's way more random than the first game, and guns can scale all over the place, which is annoying, and the coolest weapons are also just kind of annoying to get, rather than necessarily, hey, this boss drops this cool thing, they drop it every time, and you're just rolling for a good one. There's way more variance to who drops what, how you get things, and it is, you know, just a grind on top of a grind on top of a grind. It takes forever to get anything especially cool. It's frustrating. I talked about a gun called the Wave just being super unique and cool in the first Borderlands, and also at no point in Borderlands 2 did I ever find anything that felt that different from the other guns as far as their literal structure is like the physics of a gun. That gun was like, guns don't work this way. That they can't. Everything in Borderlands 2 felt too safe, and generally like actual guns would. I mean, fantasy, you know, not really like actual guns, but more or less. That being said, there was one gun that really stands out, I guess. I'm sparing you from having to hear it. But there's a gun called Bane, and it's a submachine gun, so it fires really fast. And, well, every bullet fired makes the sound of, I think it's a midget psycho, like their scream sound, and they're screaming for every bullet. And if you hold it down at something like 8 bullets per second, it's actually painful if you have headphones on. And guess what? Even if you turn gun sounds to 0 in the game settings, because maybe you want to use this gun for other reasons, it still blasts at full volume. You cannot escape it. This is some of what I was talking about with the humor of the game. It's over the top on everything. And that's kind of the thing I love to see in these games, even when it's to my detriment. If there's anything the game does significantly better than the first one, though, it's the story. For starters, there's an actual narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is already a step up. But the character dialogue does so much more than just provide a delivery system for jokes. Don't get me wrong, it's still also doing that, but while simultaneously being sort of, I mean not really, but sort of serious and doing important plot stuff. I already talked about how Handsome Jack is terrific, but here's an example. He's chatting away in your ear and starts telling you about this diamond horse he bought. Then as you get further in whatever you're doing, he reveals it's a real live horse made out of diamonds because he's ungodly wealthy. But then he also wants to name it, and he thinks about, you know, naming it after you, calling it shit for brains and stuff. But then he does land on Butt Stallion. This is the same lowbrow humor that these games are known for, and I'm absolutely here for it. But beneath this hilarious outward personality on Jack lies a demented, lonely man that's really just the world's sorest loser, and that tugs away at just a little bit every single one of his interactions with you as you continue to thwart his plans and overturn his prospective empire, leading to one of the most satisfying endings to a character arc in the history of the medium. You kill him. In the end, he's a weak, pathetic man with nothing, and then he dies. And, feels good. But Jack isn't the only great story thing going on with the game. The original cast returns, including the Vault Hunters that you got to play as that time around, and they've really moved up in the world, leading the resistance against Hyperion and Handsome Jack. One of the worst parts about the world building in the first Borderlands game is that there was never really, felt like there was a place that people lived. They were there, but where's a house, right? Well, now you have the city of Sanctuary, which acts as this resistance's base of operations, and it's a great place. There's stuff to explore with hidden nooks and crannies, little character moments, and even just random bystanders going about their lives with side quests and subplots and claptraps there. He's hilarious. I love that little annoying dude. It's like a real role-playing game with real cities, and somehow this game figured that out more than Final Fantasy XIII did, which is admittedly not a bar at all. Basically, Borderlands 2 took a phenomenal game that was rough around the edges and smoothed every edge to the point that it became a finely tuned, brilliantly polished experience. And while I liked some of the rough edges, especially a handful of the weirder, clunkier weapons, and there's times I especially enjoy the more focused scale of some parts of the gameplay for the first title, I cannot deny that Borderlands 2 generally decided you can't have too much of a good thing, and I don't think I can disagree. Join me tomorrow as I talk about my 36th favorite game, where I get to talk about my favorite roguelike ever made.